It often takes a stunt like faking a newspaper like the International Herald Tribune here, or scaling a massive crane to get the world's attention. After all, it's more likely to grab the headlines than the negotiations of an ad hoc working group ever will. For those of us lucky enough not to be immersed in the never-ending bureaucratic manoeuvrings of global politics, events like the climate change talks can appear impenetrable. The sheer amount of protocols and procedures are daunting for newcomers such as ICT companies, and for an industry that thrives on innovation and growth, the lack of visionary thinking by the assembled government delegations can be frustrating to say the least. Little wonder then that ICT is making no headway in the talks. It's also competing for attention against far more powerful and experienced lobby groups. But the ICT sector cannot afford to dismiss COP15 and any resulting protocol, as the World Wildlife Fund explains.
I think the process and the decision in Copenhagen will be of very, very big importance for the ICT community when it comes to all the possibilities that lies for the ICT community in a low-carbon infrastructure in the future that we will absolutely need to shift into from the high-carbon infrastructure where we are in today. And the decision in Copenhagen will be very, very important in guiding that shift. Another thing that is not discussed in the talks the way it should be is the role of cities. 75% of emissions worldwide come from cities, when we're talking about carbon dioxide emissions, so about the biggest emissions. So what are the role of the cities in the future, and how can the cities go from being a problem to a solution? And then ICT and being able to live in cities, to be able to work in cities and move in cities in a way that does not destroy the planet, ICT and the infrastructure will have a crucial importance.
So why aren't ICTs being addressed at this forum?
It's just a shift that requires some vision, and a shared vision as well, what we think is needed to be set up in the form of technology objectives, so that the world is not only focusing on coping with 2 degrees, because we don't think that is communicating anything to the cities or the businesses around the world what that actually means. We think you need to set up an objective that is saying, okay, 75% renewables at least by 2050. That is what we need to aim for in order to cope with under 2 degrees warming. And that's much more clearer signal to businesses. And if we're going to aim for 75% renewables, then we will need to have smart grids. And we can't have smart grids unless the ICT sector is together with the renewable industry, together with other industries, pushing for this and getting support by public funding and governments around the world to actually push for smart grids.
So if we can't get governments focused and interested in ICTs and onto any agreements from Copenhagen, where does that leave the role of ICT?
If governments can at least agree to steer where we are heading in a fairly concrete way in the future, so another of these technology objectives we're calling for example, is to modern energy access for all people around the planet by 2025. If we're going to achieve that, so if there's a goal here set up, or in Copenhagen set up for that, we know that in order to manage to have energy access for poor people around the world, ICT solutions for grids that it's offline grids will need a lot of ICT solutions and development of ICT solutions in order to deliver that together with telecom providers, for example, for base stations.
So is it also important that governments have an ongoing dialogue with solutions providers?
I think it is, and I think the opposite as well. I think it's very important that service providers all around the world now actually in a month up to Copenhagen knock on the door and say, I hear that no country has actually submitted the role of ICT, because the reason that the role of ICT is not really in the text at the moment and negotiate is but no country has submitted and said you must include ICT. But many countries have submitted we must have the role of carbon capture and storage for COPA. So it's a matter of going to governments and saying, you need to put this into the process, because we as WWF and other organizations here, we are observers to the process. We are not actually a part that puts in the negotiation text. We're trying to convince the parts that are here to put our proposals into text.
So what do you think should be in the draft agreement in terms of ICTs?
Well, I think any solution that has a proven potential to reduce emissions by about 15% of global emissions, which is the assessments that have been made. And then it's the knowledge of having programs for different technology areas that can be on a global cooperation platform. That's what we would like to see, and that could very well be the outcome of Copenhagen. And then it could be, for example, that there's going to be technology action programs in a range, globally, amongst all parties, in a range of technology areas. And then maybe they will list these areas, and then ICT could be one of those. Or they might say, we'll list those areas in the future, but we acknowledge that we need to, as a global community, collaborate on some of the major solutions to combat climate change.